The Sicha from Pasuk Chelik of Ches. V'asidis Yasa Melech HaMashiach Meheli Yigol Amikan Yasa. We learned it at least twice. You know that Sicha?
Why that becomes a din?
Right. Why it's a din that not only do you have to mention Mashiach, but you have to say a tefillah. A Mashiach zal komen. The halacha b'derech hagel. But that Sicha, so the Rebbe asks, why does the RaMbaM have to say it? And the RaMbaM goes into Limishmeres. He goes into the same thing that he goes in over here. He brings the RaSaG also in that Sicha. That the one of the halachas of Para Aduma is that you're supposed to keep it. One of the dinim in the Ash of Para Aduma is supposed to have shmira. I mean, we learned just now, for those who learn Perek Achat Layayim, we learned the halachas of Para Aduma. They're impossible halachas.
What?
The halachas of Para Aduma.
Yeah, I think learning all these halachas of Tumah, Para Aduma, Karbonis, and things. Do we really want Mashiach?
One year, it was before the stroke, I think, yet. The Sheikh Abad, there was a young married guy, they invited me to come speak at the convention. And in those days, I used to prepare like crazy. I would prepare so much material. I didn't know yet that you're supposed to say one dumb thing 20 times instead of saying 20 things.
Down, you don't prepare?
No. Now, I say less things and more time. I was like a yeshiva bach. I would just cram it. So they gave me 2 talks at the Chabad convention, the women's convention, and one of them was how much life, and I started to dump on them all the halachas. In the middle of my talk, Mrs. Swerdler gets up and says, ladies, we're going to have lots of servants, because it was frightening. Lots of servants, ladies. She was so afraid that they're going to lose their interest in Mashiach. And I started studying all the dinim, how it's going to be. Okay, Rabbi said, let's learn the Sicha. The Nekud of the Sicha is that there's a mitzvah of Mishmeres, for Para Aduma. It's a mitzvah to guard the Para Aduma. The Chiddush is that the Mishmeres of Para Aduma has 2 things. The Para Aduma has to be watched, and that it has to be watched for every Jew. For every Jew. It's almost as if, and I'm putting words into the Sicha's mouth, but that it's as if the person who's guarding the Para Aduma is guarding it on behalf of each one of us. As if we all, just like by Ma'amodas and Karbonis, every year has to stand on a carbon, but because we doubt, we stand Shluchim. So there's an inyan that every Yid has to guard Para Aduma. It's a personal inyan, not a personal halacha. It's a personal inyan place. It's divided up into 3 parts. Yeah. And there were people who were supposed to guard it. The halachas of watching the ash, the water, and then the kiddush. And you had to watch it, and you couldn't be Mesiach Das. And if you were Mesiach Das, or you did another malacha, you drew other water, it became impossible. It was impossibly technical. Part of the whole business of Paras Chatas, and all because of those tztukim, you know. That's right. Right. If not for the tztukim, so we wouldn't have this ma'aseh with full yam, so we wouldn't have this what's the Lashon? The extra chumras that they make by Miley is saying also about Para. All the Meshigan chumras, Para Aduma is because since the tztukim said that full yam is possible, so we're going to dafke b'mitama everybody with full yam, and to offset the fact that everyone's with full yam, we take on these chumras upon chumras, makes it impossible. But okay, we're talking about the ash now, not about the process of preparing it and not being makadesh the ash. I state in Yerushalmi, bedin hu, truthfully, shetagdam hachedesh to Para. Really, we should first say Pashas hachedesh, then we say Pashas Para. Why? Because that's how it happened then. That be'echad b'nisnu kama mishkan u'b'shei nisnu Para. Because historically, Reish Chedesh Nisnu they put at the Beis HaMikdash, and in Beis Nisnu they were commanded in the halachas of Para Aduma. Which of course explains why there were people who couldn't get ready. I don't know why he explains why. To do the Pesach Sheni. They need the Pesach, but I just made a mistake. Just beat a kettle. Yeah. So now, the Lama Para Kedem. If you should do Korban Pesach, HaChodesh, before Para Aduma, because this is connected to Reish Chedesh, Chedesh is Al-Chem Reish Chodoshim, and this is on Beis Nissen. So why is Para Kedem? So the answer that the Yerushalmi, this is a Gemara Yerushalmi, Shehi Taharasan Shel Kol Yisrael. It's the Ta'ar of all the Jewish people. It says that Friya Leit Ben Pashas Para Lahazes is all the Ta'ar. She'asu B'schayim B'Ta'ar, and then Noch Pashas HaChedesh, Shasham Pashas Pesach. So the whole Sicha is going to revolve around this word Kol Yisrael. Ta'aras, this word Kol Yisrael is the Yisod of this whole Sicha, that is the Ta'ar of all the Jewish people. Next paragraph. From Lashna Yerushalmi, Shitarasan shall call Yisrael, the expression of the Gemara, that Para Aduma is not of Kol Yisrael is Muchach as the Tara of Para Aduma. The idea that the Para Aduma is connected to Tara is negated to Allah Yidden, touches all Jewish people. And then the Rebbe says, Isaac moved from them Teichen in your darkness, not just from the word, but also from the greater content of the Yerushalmi, as Masakim and Amazolein and Pachas Para. Skip the brackets. Free from Pachas Achedish, Mitzad dem Tam, Shi Para, Tarat Yukashal. The whole Yerushalmi is indicating, in addition to that word, that the idea of Para Aduma is negated to the Tara of every Jew. So the Rebbe says that's not true. V'tzarech biyah, right? Para Aduma is only needed of people who are tamei, right? Nochmer, if the whole community is tahir, they do the korban based on tumah. So the only time that Para Aduma is negeya is when it's only a miyat that's tamei. You have to mitay them for Para Aduma. So why does the Yerushalmi say the lashon truth that Astan shall call Yisrael? That's the kash of the Rebbe. Second paragraph, second column. Muzmin zognu bepnimiyas anyan. So you need to say, and the Rebbe is saying that he's not explaining this in halacha, even though there's a halacha component to the Sicha. He's not going to be discussing the Ta'arastan shall call Yisrael api halacha. He's going to be discussing the idea that Para Aduma represents Ta'arastan shall call Yisrael api Chassidus. As das was Para is Ta'arastan shall call Yisrael. The idea of Para Aduma, the bringing of the Para Aduma, the preparing of the Para Aduma is representative of the theme of the purity of the whole nation. It doesn't only mean that every Jew has an association with Tumas Mes and therefore needs to have Para Aduma. No, but instead, Azat Tahara, Para Aduma represents a concept in Tahara, was Kol Yisrael davon onkel b'tzir. Every Jew, including a Jew who's never encountered a dead body, needs it. In was faramatzav zeizol nor zayin, no matter what kind of level they're in, und das dafke greit sei zu mean von achedische Pesach bis zum verkorben Pesach. So the Rebbe says, you look at the wording of the Yerushalmi, you cannot say that the Yerushalmi means only the technical din of chayev adam atar atzmei beregel. The idea that in order to bring the korban Pesach, you tie yourself lemes. You have to say that there's something spiritual about it, which is negay even to those Yidden who are legamre tahir. But Paras Chatas represents Ta'arasan shall call Yisrael in Pnimius, and that's the Rebbe's question in this Sicha. What is the meaning of Ta'arasan shall call Yisrael Pnimius, and how is it connected to Para Aduma? So the Rebbe digresses. Rebbe does verstehen, but changes the subject. The RaMbaM sagt in Mitzvahs, and the Rebbe is going to bring later RaSaG. As the mitzvah from Para Aduma is says Para Aduma, the reason make Para Aduma is Kedei Sheyeh Efra Mezuman, that the ash of the Para Aduma should be prepared, ready. Lemish Yitzadech Elav, to whoever need to turn the page. LeTaharas Tumas Meis, to become purified from Tumas Meis. As the Tachlis HaMitzvah Bashtet, the end of Para Aduma's mitzvah is Nishnot in Nutzen dem Eifer B'Shas HaTzera. Preparing the ash of Para Aduma is a mitzvah. Preparing the ash of Para Aduma is like building a sukkah, you know. Preparing ash Para Aduma is like buying Dalat Minim. You know, there's a Yerushalmi that says you're supposed to make a bracha sheket shonim v'seisiv v'sivanu la seis sukkah, and then make a separate bracha sheket shonim v'seisiv v'sivanu leisha b'sukkah, which we don't do, but there's such an idea.
Make the shechiyano after leisha.
Okay, fair enough. But Para Aduma also, the mitzvah of Para Aduma is not only to have it when someone needs it, the mitzvah is to prepare it. So making the Para Aduma's ash is a mitzvah in itself, because there's a mitzvah of hazmona, of having it ready. You know, like you have a Masechta Beya, right? There's halachas of muktzeh, and then there's halachas of hachona, and hachona is the deiraisa, ve'echilu the sheyaviu. Para Aduma has a mitzvah of hachona. There's a thing to have it, in case you need it. And the mitzvah of having it is a thing unto itself. Right? When a yid ver tome mes darf haben die Pa'afra. Nor, 5 lines to page 418. That Eifer HaPora darf sein milechatchile great. The mitzvah of Para Aduma consists of having it ready for jeden was vet es darf, whoever is going to need it. As zu jede Zeit was a yid, whatever time a Jew vet sich neutiken in der Tara will have need for this Tara. soll bald können sich beteiligt sein mit Nefer Apod, you should be able to do it right away. So it's not a technicality, it's the mitzvah, it's the deiraisa. The deiraisa is to have it ready. You know, everybody knows that you can't do a mitzvah without a chana, right? You can't sit in the sukkah unless you build the sukkah before. But building the sukkah is the mitzvah, or sitting in the sukkah is the mitzvah. And there's a svara to say that building the sukkah is not the mitzvah. You're only making the mitzvah when you sit in it. Buying the daled minim is not the mitzvah. Shaking it on sukkahs is the mitzvah. So it's a hachana to mitzvah. It's a hechsher mitzvah. By Para Aduma, the hachana is the mitzvah. Because the mitzvah is to have it ready. Und der RaMbaM bringt die Ruf dem Possuk.
It's not part of the mitzvah. See, it is the mitzvah. The mitzvah is Para Aduma. Part of that is the mitzvah of having it ready. It's a separate mitzvah.
I don't think there's two Asher Kedshodim Mitzvahs of Tivonus. Maybe I'm wrong.
Para Aduma mitzvah?
Para Aduma, I say, sure, the mitzvah is
getting ready to Para Aduma is part of that one mitzvah, it's a totally different mitzvah.
It's the same mitzvah. It's the same mitzvah. But when you're are you Makayim Para Aduma preparing the ash, or you Makayim the mitzvah Para Aduma but actually be Matayim a mess? You could say that until you Matayim your first mess, you were not Makayim the mitzvah making the Para Aduma because it didn't fulfill its purpose. And until I'm actually Matayim a Tmei mace, I haven't satisfied what the mitzvah is. So the RaMbaM is saying, as being from a Possuk, that the mitzvah is to have it. That's the mitzvah. You're Makayim the mitzvah by having it. It's like the story of Rebbe Sicha.
If it's a tumah mate, the time of the mace, it could be any year that needs it at any time.
Right.
It is for all years.
The actual spring or something.
Well, no, it's for all the Yidden who need it.
Yeah, need it.
Kol Yisrael doesn't mean all the Yidden who need it. Kol Yisrael doesn't mean any Yid. Kol Yisrael means every Yid. The Rebbe is not, this is a Gemara. The Rebbe is learning, the Rebbe is saying Kol Yisrael, that means even a Jew is perfectly tired, needs Para Aduma as part of something. That's the Shaila of the Sicha. And let's continue. Okay? Und der RaMbaM bringt the Ruf dem Possuk. Limishmeres, that Para Aduma has a need of Mishmeres. Was the Pirush HaPoshut is the simple type of Mishmeres, as der Efer HaPara darf sein great. You see, Shmira means to watch. But the RaMbaM doesn't say Mishmeres means to watch. Mishmeres means prepared, muzuman, muchan. The Efer HaPara darf sein great Mishume, ready, guarded, for jeden Yid von Bnei Yisrael, and the Rebbe says again, Kol Yisrael, Esher, vete dafen onkommen zu der Tarba Efer Para. Perhaps a Jew is going to need to use the Asher Para Aduma, and therefore there's a mitzvah to have it prepared. And then the Rebbe continues, the Chiddush name is Nachmed, the Chiddush even more. If I tell me mass, okay, so the Rebbe goes into a whole thing that you have no obligation to be tahir, except you have to be a leregel, and a lot of people are potaf mali a leregel. So you cannot say that the preparing of the Asher Para Aduma is literally for every Jew, because not every Jew needs it. You can only say that since there's a concept there's a mitzvah called Hazmana, that it should be sitting ready, so even though maybe not every Jew needs it, it's for every Jew in the readiness state, and the idea of being prepared. Look at the next paragraph. Kumtais, 418 second column. As das was say for a part of the time is Zuma, the phenomena of the Asher Para Aduma being ready. Whoever's going to who's encountered the tomb of a mace, is es nicht dafka for einem was die Tara mitum osei is ba'imachiev. It's not only for a person who has an obligation to purify himself so he can go in the base of Mikdash, nor eich for RaSaG, even for such a person was ein Tara is totally b'retzein. He can stay tummy if he wants, he can be mitay himself if he wishes. Und wenn wird nes'eder berotzen, the Tar atzmei, that whenever he will decide he wants to become pure, muss euch for ihm sein mezuman, the RaMbaM paskin, the ash has to be ready, willing, and able for him, the Efer Para, the ash of the Para Aduma, as al sich kennen mitay sein gleich. That when he wishes to, he will tell right away. So now wait, remember, we're not now doing Yerushalmi now, we're doing RaMbaM. Let's understand. In Sif Aleph of this Sicha, the Rebbe quoted the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says that Para Aduma is for Kol Yisrael. We're going to get back to that Yerushalmi, okay? Let's not confuse it. But in order to explain that Yerushalmi, the Rebbe then brought a RaMbaM. The RaMbaM is not saying the same thing as the Yerushalmi. The Yerushalmi says that Para Aduma is Taras Kol Yisrael. What the RaMbaM says that Para Aduma has a mitzvah of Limishmeres. Has to be ready for whenever a Jew wants it or needs it. So let's understand that we went from one subject to another subject. Let's keep them separate.
So if you never use it, the mitzvah stays.
Right, because of the Limishmeres.
And if you use it in another mitzvah, is the whole thing two mitzvahs or one mitzvah? Two parts of one mitzvah.
Two mitzvahs. Din Para Aduma and Din Tumas Meinida. That's it. It's Metame Satahedim. That's right. There's no separate mitzvah of spraying the ash. There's one mitzvah to prepare it. So you have to say the Kohanim did it, right? Huh?
No mitzvah to spray.
There's no separate mitzvah to spray it.
Oh, no separate.
The way you would answer your question would be as follows. The RaMbaM Paskins, Halacha, the Gemara says that all mitzvahs of Kohanim, they would say Hashekadishanu b'Kedishasa shel Arav Tzivana, like the Kohanim do by Birkat Kohanim. Para Aduma has made by Kohanim, so you have to assume that you said Hashekadishanu b'Kedishasa shel Arav V'Tzivanu. Last says Para Aduma. Here comes the shaila. If somewhere down the road a Kohen took a little ash, or anybody, and he sprayed, I think it had to be Kohanim, and spraying it on a fellow Jew, did he make another bracha? If it's mamish, one mitzvah is no, it's a hemshich to the original bracha. L'chayre mistami made another bracha, but I don't know
because that was made by different kinds.
Could have made 100 years before. Could have made 1,000 years before.
By first basic mikdash
Right.
was made one time.
Right. Okay, now.
That's why the Rebbe says that he got
Right.
But in the Sicha over here, like in Pashat Shmini, the Rebbe says, Zesh Avru, Chayv Adol Hamas B'Regel, has nothing to do with Beis HaMikdash.
Yeah, but here the Rebbe says not like that. Fedish not like that. Yeah, he says Faket, yeah, okay. Gimel is the RaSaG. Now, I don't want to get too caught up in the RaSaG. Because what happens over here is that the Rebbe brings Marif per law. Marif per law. The Rebbe loves him. The Rebbe brings the Harif. I don't know who he is even. The Rebbe has been tying to the Halacha of the RaSaG so many times. It's a small little sefer. The RaSag's Minyan HaMitzvah is a tiny sefer. It's a 3-volume set that's this big, because 99% of the sefer is Harif per law. He's a very, very big God. And the Rebbe brings him Likutei Sichos Nachanand. And the Rebbe argues with him over here. The Lashon of the RaSaG is, look inside. Der Inyan is Eich Mudgish and Lashon RaSaG in Zayin Sefer HaMitzvahs. And I want to remind you that side the RaMbaM Sefer HaMitzvahs and side the RaSaG mitzvahs were not written in Lashon Kodesh. They're written in Arabic. And they're Targumim. They're Targum. And I think there's different Targumim. Wo schreibt, as the mitzvah for Para Aduma is, this is the quote, Upara Limishmeres beteder, like Todder V'Sheini Todder Kedem. The para, which has to be guarded in a way of teder, in a way of permanence. You know what? I take that back. Maybe the RaSaG is written in Hebrew. The RaMbaM is written in Arabic. Para Limishmeres beteder, that the para was put aside, was guarded beteder. So the Marif per law has the same problem as the Rebbe has. What does this mean? Limishmeres beteder. Limishmeres has to be constantly watched. And his chiddush is that para Limishmeres beteder means the ash of the Para Aduma that was sprayed on the Kohen Gadol before Yom Kippur, and the ash was sprayed on the Kohen who did the Para Aduma when they did another Para. So it was Limishmeres, it was kept as a Shmira, beteder constantly, for one purpose, to betire the Kohen Gadol for Yom Kippur, to betire the Kohen who was going to make the Para. And the Rebbe doesn't like it. Because that's not exactly teder. Once a year the Kohen gets ash of Para Aduma sprayed on him, it does not constitute teder. So he brings the Marif per law, he brings the Bariches. It's 2 whole columns, the Sicha, and the Rebbe doesn't like it. So if you look in Sif Dalet, look at the bottom 419, their fathers mistaber loyma. The Rebbe is arguing with this Achrin. Harif per law, I don't know who he is. But the Rebbe brings him so much in Likutei Sichos as the Rebbe, to the contrary. Kavanas RaSaG, the meaning of the RaSaG, bit Para Limishmeres beteder is Kidivri RaMbaM now. That the RaSaG and the RaMbaM are in the same sheet. The RaMbaM says that it has to be Mishmeres if anybody wants to become Toher. The RaSag's Lashon, Para Limishmeres beteder, Marif per law decides that it means the Kohen Gadol who's going to be Mitoher when they for Yom Kippur. And the Rebbe says, I disagree with him, and I agree with that the RaSaG is saying the same thing as the RaMbaM. As Iker mitzvah saparahi, the primary mitzvah, the base mitzvah Para Aduma is, as the Efer HaPara soll ständig sein gerät, should always be ready. Anybody who needs it, L'taras tumas mes, to purify mes. That's the lashon RaMbaM, and then he brings again the lashon RaSaG, Limishmeres beteder. Says ken kashenit from them RaSaG nus the lashon Limishmeres. The word Limishmeres, which l'chayda means has to be put away in the chayils. Turn the page. I skipped the whole pilpul. What's the Marifalas kasha was of teretz, and the Rebbe is saying he disagrees with the Marifalas pshat. Was ein Kavane in dem Loschen is nicht ab Idrashas Chazal, aber Pshuta Shal Mikra. You see, the para ash was divided up into 3 parts. 1/3 of it was not used. It was kept. Beis HaMikdash. The Marif Pala assumes that that's what the RaSaG is talking about. And that's why he has a kasha. And that's why his tenant says they use it once a year. And the Rebbe says, no, I disagree with the Marif Pala's pshat and the RaSaG. He's not talking about the ash that was not used, which was in the chil. He's talking about the ash which was put in the mishmar, in the beis for the yidden to use all the time. That's what he holds. The lashon is mishmeres, and the lashon mishmeres we presume means mishmeres bechil. So the Rebbe says it's nita peidrashas chazal nor pritza mikra. That the RaSag's word mishmeres is not going on the Gemara, it's going on the Possuk. And just like the RaMbaM brought the Possuk v'hois ladas b'ritzol limishmeres, and he translates Limishmeres Lashon Hachana. So he says that the RaSaG also holds that Mishmeres means Lashon Hachana. Right, Mezuman, prepared 5 lines from the top of the page. As v'hoi saladas b'nei Yisrael Limishmeres meint, oich oder gar beirke dem klolos ha'eif was man halten great, lemishi yitztarech. So the Rebbe holds that the RaSag's 3 words, based on Podel, Mishmeres beteder, is the same as the RaMbaM, and Mishmeres doesn't mean for safekeeping, Mishmeres means for readiness.
So the other says that the RaSaG and the RaMbaM.
Same thing, right? Ubefrat das sheyitztarech is doch keil kein godlos manal. You conclude the kein godlos well. Und wie es moch von dem was der RaMbaM bringt der Reihe of the minyan the mitzvah from Para Aduma mezuman, he brings the same possible mishmeres. And for sure in Shitas RaMbaM, mishmeres doesn't mean the ash that wasn't used. For sure when the RaMbaM says mishmeres, it means the ash that was used. So you could say that the RaSaG means the same thing. Sure. Now, this is the end of the nigla. This is it. It's an unusually easy Sicha. Nigla of the Sicha der Weile is that the RaMbaM brings the Possuk Limishmeres, the RaSaG brings the Possuk Limishmeres, and the Limishmeres means Muchan and Mezubah for use. That's the whole nigla. Okay? Now, why did the Rebbe bring this nigla? The Rebbe brought this nigla because he wants to explain the Yoshna of the Yerushalmi, which was the Sicha started, that Para Aduma was Taras Kol Yisrael. And the Rebbe is resolving the shaila of Para Aduma is Taras Kol Yisrael, emphasis on the word Kol, through this whole business that Mishmeres means you have to have it ready for people to use. So now we're on page 420, right column, 2nd paragraph from the bottom, last full paragraph. And this is where the Chassidus starts. Men darf aber verstehen. The question is still outstanding. Favos is take. Why is take? How do you say take in English? Der Inyan von Efer Para Aduma. Why is it such an ikir that the Efer Para Aduma, the mitzvah is to have it? Bis as men is madgish, the emphasis is, as es nit genug, wir soll haben the Efer Para b'shas hatzedech, that it should be available when you actually need it. Nor as I'm Limishmeres. It has to be always ready in case you'll need it. Beteder, ständig reit, lemishi tzarech elaf. The Rebbe's kasha is what makes Para Aduma so unique. And I'm going to use Lamdische Sprach, that the hachana becomes the mitzvah. Let's say for the sake of argument that making tefillin is not a mitzvah. Let's say for the sake of argument that writing a mitzvah is not a mitzvah. The mitzvah is putting it up. Let's say that building a sukkah is not a mitzvah, the mitzvah is sitting in it. Let's say that buying the dalminim of lulav is not a mitzvah and tying them is not a mitzvah, the mitzvah is using it on Yom Tov. Why by Para Aduma is preparing it the mitzvah? What makes Para Aduma? There are no things that what we would assume is the hechsher mitzvah. Is the pressure for the mitzvah becomes the mitzvah because the mitzvah is to have it ready. Why by Para Aduma such a strong emphasis? No one is going to say that there's a mitzvah to have ready a sukkah for sukkahs. Everybody knows if you're not going to build it before sukkahs, you can't build it on sukkahs. But the mitzvah is not to have it ready. The mitzvah is to sit in it. But mainly you have to have it ready. Why is Para Aduma different? Okay, tefillin. Tefillin. Is it a mitzvah to make tefillin or is it a mitzvah to wear tefillin? When am I going to need it? Mezuzah. It's a mitzvah to make mezuzahs or to put them up on walls.
There is a difference in Torah, the way it's expressed. It doesn't tell you how to make tefillin, how to make a mezuzah. It just tells you do tefillin, do mezuzah, sit in the sukkah. And the instructions for Para Aduma are specifically written.
Yeah, but we're not talking about the Possuk. We're talking about the Halacha.
No, it probably buttresses the question. It doesn't make it less, probably makes it more. The fact that the instructions for a Para, it doesn't say if somebody gets Tama, you use a Para Aduma. No, it tells you first how to make a whole Para Aduma. So it emphasizes.
Okay, I don't know how much of that is a diuk, because that's how Torah Shebeksav and Torah Shebal interface. Some things are written more b'pratiyas, some written b'pratiyas.
Yeah, we're talking about now with Mitzvah, so
right.
That's the perfect example.
Right. We're talking now about the din. The din. The din of Para Aduma that you have it ready. The din of Tefillin not to have it ready. This is the Rebbe's kash. And the Rebbe's answer is pure Chassidus. It's not Nigla, it's pure Chassidus. Hey, jede Zach in Gashmis wird nimshach v'nishtashl von Unyanei Beruchnius. The answer to this question is that you have to look in Ruchnius. When azay euch, skip the parenthesis, benegei teiru mitzvah, the same is true in Yiddishkeit, as the pratim for jede mitzvah begashmias, the details of each mitzvah that are begashmias, sein aufgestellt like dem teichen a mitzvah are aligned according to the meaning of this mitzvah, wie the mitzvah is beruchnius. If you want to understand the difference between the hachana of Efer Para and the hachana of a pair of tefillin, you have to understand the teichen of Para Aduma and the teichen of tefillin. The same is true here. Das was mitzvahs Para Aduma. The fact that the commandment for Para Aduma is ba'ofen says in such a way as muz zayin efer mezuma, the ash has to be ready. And that's the mitzvah. Nimmt sich es derfun. The root of that is was the mitzvah from Para Aduma ba'avei ruchnis, because whatever Para Aduma means spiritually, listen carefully, is an inyan was fodder sich ständig. The spiritual parallel of Para Aduma is an idea in spirituality which is always relevant. The spiritual parallel of tefillin is once a day. The spiritual parallel of Para Aduma is constantly, and that's why the halacha is Limishmeres beteder. As darf sein mezuma the chalachad ve'echad v'avidasi yizbarach has to be ready for each person, because spiritually speaking, whatever Para Aduma means is negei b'chol rega v'rega. And the Rebbe explains the Rebbe. Para Aduma is in Yana Tshuva. You can go home. Sicha is over. That's it. That's the word. You want to know why by Para Aduma, preparing the ashes, the mitzvah, and by many other things, the preparation is not the mitzvah. Say, look at the kavana. The kavana of Para Aduma is tshuva. The kavana of Tefillin is not tshuva. The kavana of Suk is not tshuva. And tshuva has to be always. And now the Rebbe is going to build this position. The rest of the Sicha is going to be the argument about how tshuva is a constant mitzvah. Para Aduma is in Yonah Tshuva. The theme of Para Aduma is Tshuva. Okay? Thomas Mez Beruchnius main, das was durch Avenes, wird Avenes Echem, Hayim Avdilim Vegemer, Usnit Dod, and Va'atam Advekem, and the Shem Alakechem Chayim. Thomas May spiritually means that I'm spiritually not alive. Why am I spiritually not alive? Because I'm separate from the Eibishter. Und Para Aduma, and the ash of Para Aduma, which can be Mitayr me from Tmei Meis, is in from Tshuva. Mitayr dem Yidden, to purify the Jew who's become impure, bintim tzurich, and reattaches him, l'sharshe mekene belakim chaim, to his written source in the living God. So Para Aduma means a person is in a state of disconnect from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and the ash of Para Aduma is a phenomenon of reconnect, and that's the theme of tshuva. And the Rebbe says the message of Para Aduma is that tshuva is b'chol rega v'rega. Next page, 421. But das is the beard of them. This explains the fact that in Para Aduma gefindt men zwei tzavas dikinyam is two extremes of Para Aduma. Von ein Seite it calls us chutz davka. On the one hand, Para Aduma is on outside the camp. Chutz the sholosh machas outside all three machares. Nicht wie karbonas was mokem muz sein davka in pnim. Right? It's the Rebbe's lashon in Tanya from the Gemara. Chatas kaya rachmana. It's called the chatas, but it's not a karba. Because karbonas now will be outside the Hazara. And Para Aduma is not only outside the Hazara, it's outside Yerushalmi, it's outside Ezras Noshim, it's outside the Chil, it's outside Ezras Yisrael, it's outside Yerushalmi. But it's called, right, it's called the Karban. Ul-Idach, on the other hand, 421, first column, second half, Dav the Azor Zayin Davke Lechach Pnei Ayel Meid, you have to spray it towards Ayel Meid, Miskavin Ve'roye Pischei Shal Heichol, B'shas Azor Sadam, you have to mechav to throw it in the Beis HaMikdash. You don't normally do it, but Karbanas, where does the blood go by Karbanas? On the Mizbeach. By Para Aduma, it's going into the Beis HaMikdash itself. Those are the two sides. Says the Rebbe Varum, the reason is, in Teshuva zayin dot fake tov is Teshuva is two extremes. On the one hand, that Uftuf and Teshuva is special because mechaper u'mavaras zayin dem chutz. It atones and it brings clarity to he who was outside. Parenthesis, das was is chutz l'chol ha'machan el kedusha, something which is out of all of the camps of holiness. Ze is mechaper u'matayr eichs denis, right? Teshuva could atone also for sins done on purpose, which are gimel klubat meis legamri. Nishvi stam karbonas v'zayne mechaper blaze of shgogas. Karbonas, as a rule, are mechaper only for shegig, not for mezid. Teshuva is mechaper for a mezid. So Teshuva, on the one hand, goes lower than other karbonas. It can lift up the lowest klipa. What's the other side of the coin? The ability to bring atonement even to the worst avedis, in the highest level. So Para Aduma is lower than any carbon, and Para Aduma's source is higher than any carbon. Para Aduma is lower than any carbon. It's metaken avedis of mezid, right? Klip sholet al Rebbe says it's mitayr and metaken sholish klip meis legamre. But the koyach to do that because it's higher than any carbon.
Thank you. Para Aduma, how do you see that?
It's a pikabola. In you guys get the shchaf, it's a pikabola. The way it manifests is lama nismuch pashas misas mil pashas Para Aduma. That ma Para Aduma mechaper af misas tzadikim mechaperes. So misas tzadikim mechaper misa. So the Alter Rebbe connects it to the beard of shalosh kumisat meis legamre. That's how the Alter Rebbe explains it. That's how he develops it. Next paragraph, Davka HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shalamayla Me'atera, only Hashem was higher than the Teda, answers the question, and he says, Yasa Tshuva is Chapel. You all know the Medrash, right? Shalu L'Nevua, Shalu L'Chochma, HaNefesh HaChetaz B'Metes Kapis, the Chochma says, and Nefesh HaChetaz, he Thomas. Shalu L'Nevua, so Chochma is Malchus. Shalu L'Nevua is Netzach V'Hei, the Nefesh HaChetaz Kapir, and the answer is, he'll have Yisurim and he'll have Kapara. Shalu l'teira nefesh etzchap metes chaper. The answer is Yavi karb mischapele. Shalu HaKadosh Baruch Hu hanefesh echataz metes chaper yasa tshuva ischapele. So the Maimorim observe that when you ask Teira and he answers Yavi karb mischapele, it means you can only have a kapara for shegir, because mezid is no carbon. But Shalu HaKadosh Baruch Hu, when he says yasa tshuva, is even for mezid. So Para Aduma is not stama korban; it's a madrega of a korban which is parallel to tshuva, which is metaken even zdenis. And that's what Rebbe means when he says here, Davka HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shalamayla Me'atera zog dem enfer ve'etze v'tziva yasa tshuva v'yischapalei. So now, what's the kash? What's the kash? Para Aduma presents tshuva. Got it. Para Aduma represents the ability to go so high and draw in such a great koyach that give him attacking even shalosh kuv meis legamri, right? Got that too, right? What's the next question? I never did an Aveda in my life. What do you want from me? How are the titles called Yisrael?
Doesn't exist.
Oh, wait. Keben meinen. So now the Rebbe is going to ask this question with Gevaldik Arichas. As der Inyan in Tshuva is dafka far einem was kvarchot. That if a person doesn't have Aveda, so he needs the spiritual symbolism of Para Aduma, which is Tshuva. Nor that onkommen to Para Nasad B'chot. Such a person needs the ash of the Para Aduma, which is done out of the camp, and the symbolism thereof. If he walks in the straight and narrow, you understand? Now, what's our kasha going to be based on? The first of all, Limishmeres, and second of all, Taras Kol Yisrael. If Para Aduma is a geschäft from Tshuva, Para Aduma is a geschäft for the Shoyim, for Bali Tshuva, not for everybody. Is taka that you always have to do Tshuva. Like it doesn't get Likutei Sichos, right? Last 4 lines of that paragraph, from Para Aduma, which is Chos L'Shalos Machnas. Rebbe says in Likutei Sichos that the biggest tzaddikim do Tshuva to come closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but that's not Para Aduma. It's a much higher concept of Tshuva. So you could make the case that Para Aduma is connected take to tshuva. But in as much as Para Aduma is connected to tshuva, it's not speaking to every Jew. It's not Taras Kol Yisrael. It's speaking to the Rishonim amongst us. You with me, Chavre? Page 421, last full paragraph. Zok men deruf. Comes again the Gemara Yerushalmi and the RaMbaM. The RaMbaM is in Perek Beis of the Sicha, and the Gemara Yerushalmi is in Perek Alf of the Sicha. As the mitzvah Para Aduma is shiafra mezuman lemisha itzarech elov. Number one, he quotes the RaMbaM. It has to be ready for tshuva. Number two, he quotes the RaSaG as daf ligid Limishmeres beteder, has to be sitting around ready, willing, and able at every moment for you to do tshuva. Look at the Rebbe's word. You always have to have by yourself the tnuah tshuva from Para Aduma, the motion, the direction of tshuva of Para Aduma Limishmeres beteder. Vaile. Number one, you see what I'm reading? Page 421, second paragraph from the bottom. Number one, al tamin ba'atzmach ad yemesa. So I never did any Averis. I don't need to do tshuva, but I could. So I have to have the idea of tshuva in the background of the foreground of my mind in case I'll fall. Number two, next paragraph. Befrat like them cloud. As ein tzaddik ba'ord as ached v'le yechta. The Rebbe has brought bechet lashon chesarin. So it's not only the pshat if and when I'll do an Aveda, I have to do tshuva. We all have a shtikl shaychas. Turn the page. Number three, afilu ven ba'im is in ganz nitakachet. You're dealing with a person who, number one, we're not worried about al tamas of mesach. Number two, we're not even worried about ein tzaddik ba'oretz ashiyasa tevel yechti. You're talking about Datan Binyamin ben Yankiv and Kilav Datan Isha Avi David and Kilav ben David never did Naveda. The Gemara says arba meisu be'etish al nachash, right? Afilu and ba'im is in ganz nitakachet. He has no connection to Aveda. Not on level number one. Not on level number two. Ein tzaddik ba'oretz ashyesa teva leyechta. Und das was der inyan amisa kenefim hab mashlita. The fact that he dies altogether is because the Gemara says abba meisu be'etish shal nachash because of the eitz of chet eitz adat. Please skip the next paragraph. I'm sorry, I'm skipping an adizal. Is doch das guf. The very fact that even those of us who have no shaychas to Aveda die because of the Aveda of Adam Rishon, was der chet etzadas hat auf ihm avek. That the chet etzadas influences the person who the only reason he passed away because of that chet is a raya as to im hat a shaychas etiyah shal nachash that proves that there's some association with the eitz of the nachash. So from the Gemara itself, that the Gemara says, what does the Gemara say? What does the Gemara say? The Gemara says that there's some people who have no reason to die because they have no Aveda except for Chet Tadas. But they die because of Chet Tadas. That's already a connection to Chet. So you see here, Maishi, three madreges, der Weile. Madrege number one, al tam v'aschad yomesach. Madrege number two, ein tzaddik ba'oretz ashiyasa tevel yechta. Madrege number three, et yeshal nochash means you have a shaychas to Chet. Last paragraph, first column 422, and here comes number 4. Alachas kama when there is zich mizben, the Maimon Chazal, quote, I remember they were screaming this. Kol day ta'irchata Yerushalmi, kol day she'eini nivne beis hamikdash miyamav mal nalav ki'ilu ha'cheruvei. Any generation that does not build a beis hamikdash, except that they destroyed it. Ulam Yu says it's it's based on this Yerushalmi. That if the Beis Hamikdash is not built in my lifetime, I destroyed it. So that's a fourth level of there's no such thing as a Jew who has neshaychus to chet. This is even edler than et yeshal nachash. Why? I'm not doing anything wrong. I just didn't do something right. And by not doing something right, I'm guilted, I'm accused of destroying the Beis Hamikdash. Und wie bald, second column 422. Und wie bald as zet, as men gefindt sich noch in Golus, the fact of the matter is still in Golus. Und wir fragen am Golus, Cheishe, Kofel, und Mechuppe, von Ixem Mashiach, a Chutz, she'ein Chutz heimene v'adayin leine shanu. Und es kann doch sein, as es totally in seiner Welt, perhaps the reason Mashiach has come is because of me. Und kosman es kommt ne die Geules, ki'ilu hu hecherive, ruft das bimareis tshuva kepshut. So the Rebbe just brought 4 arguments that make the following assertion. There's no such thing as a Jew who doesn't have a shayches to tshuva bepoil every moment. Chacha feel it bepashtus. You only need asha para aduma if you're tamei. Yeah. Chacha filu you could say the case that you only need to do tshuva if you did Naveda. The Rebbe just brought 4 successive arguments to prove that there's no such thing as a Yid who has no shaychus to a Naveda. Ubemele, every Yid is shaychus to tshuva, Limishmeres beteder. So he says, this is the Chassidus of this halacha. Why by Para Aduma is there a din of Mishmeres, which you don't have the other mitzvahs? Which means that the mitzvah is mezuman. The teretz is because Para Aduma beruchnius means tshuva, and tshuva applies to everybody always. Always. No one's removed from it. Zayin. Kemenach alles meinen, you're still going to think, emes taka, dit nur for tshuva davlein ba'im gereit, lemishmeres taka. Yeah, taka, have to be ready in case. Aber sein dik anish heilig yashar heilig, I'm still from and I'm orthodox and I'm a beinani, is genug dat soll bei ihm sein noch nor wie adinyan neis, wie das say. My primary avodah is learning and davening, and in my back of my mind I thought, in case I do an avodah, I'll be able to do tshuva. Because mitat atma hat nicht shaychus klal to the and so on and so forth. Last paragraph, page 422. Zogt man of them, bottom of the page. You tell a yid, as Parshas Para is. Parshas Para is. Ta'ara shall call Yisrael. Now the Rebbe is going back to the Yerushalmi of Pedekaf. It's mitayed every Yid. What is the mitayed every Yid? Every Yid needs it every second. Every Yid needs to do tshuva b'chol rega v'rega. Jeder Yid daf onkomus the Tara from Para Aduma. Every Jew always, actually needs the ash of Para Aduma. Und nachmer das is Yesed von Klaus, aber das ist foundation of his whole avodah. Warum es darf sich bei ihm achodesh? He has to bring a korban. Pesach. Wie steht in Medrash, es gibt a parenthesis, als Echli a Pesach sichim la. Those who eat the korban Pesach have Para Aduma. Was an Aveda Ruchnis meint das. What does it mean spiritually? Echli Pesach, the Aveda is a tzaddik. Korban Pesach means a tzaddik. Und Echli Pesach sichim la Para, first you have to have Para Aduma. And then it can be in Korban Pesach means tzaddikim tzrichim lasas tshuva. Before the tzaddik can do the avodah of a tzaddik, the tzaddik has to do tshuva beteder, always. Every Yid always in the foreground of his mind is tshuva. For what? For etish al nachash. For what? Le'niv de beis hamikdash v'yamav. For what? Ein tzaddik ba'aretz ashiyasa teva le'yechter. For what? Al tam v'atzvach ad yemesach. Afilu a tzaddik is das was as a yesh mish'ev and hat bechirich chavshes. Bis zu ton chas v'sholem negetz nal elyon. Weiß es doch, it shows doch, as there is a Metzias. His entity unto himself, or is nicht in ganz mit der Lakus, kommt eis, die Avoide von der Tzaddik ist reingemischt am Metzias. So the Tzaddik's Avoide has little yeshes. Der Vater, a Tzaddik, onkommt zum Metall von Para Aduma, zum Metall von sich von English Metzias. You get it? So the Rebbe is explaining the Yerushalmi. Para Aduma come before Korban Pesach, as Para Aduma is Taras Kol Yisrael. Even the Yidden were tired, because Para Aduma is tshuva. And tshuva is always an ikir in our life. Sivches. It's a nice sicha. This sicha you can't call hard. It's a nice sicha. Das is gered geworden afila by a tzaddik. Even a tzaddik is always in a state of doing tshuva. Halachas kama v'kama. As dav zan der vedes hat tshuva from Para Aduma b'abeinani. Was bei sei seine Dahiruri Aveda v'chuli, Beinim don't do Avedas, but it's Huri Aveda. V'alchot shat miyad ba'aleise l'shom. Even though the moment the thought enters into his mind, is the chayah b'shtei yadayim b'chol, push both hands, is aber das was es fall im reiner Sache machshot. The fact that it came into his mind is a beweis. It's a proof that it's not becoming when to eat. This is called Yamon Perikov Tes, right? It's proof that you have a shaychus to it. V'alachas kama v'kama, even more so, diva zayin the matam of the regis beinim lord and beinini. That for pias means the beinim means kolot of the shemchi. It's the aber yadua. That hartzik evunch halavai beinini. Right? It's known the expression halavai beinini. Dav zayin di tshuva v'tarif chatoyim kipshutim. If to have tshuva and tarif averis even kipshutei. K'dei zol denoch kenen toner avedas Hashem k'deboish will do the aveda. So what's the message of the Sicha? The message of the Sicha is that Para Aduma is always ready, willing, and able to help a Jew. Because a Jew always needs to do tshuva actually. The pile.
That's why it's every year.
And that's why it's called Taras Kol Yisrael.
Because it's shech to everyone.
Always. Beteder. When Dorach Avodas HaTshuva, the Pashas Para, Kumpin Gleich. It's through the Avodah of Tshuva, Pashas Para, you come immediately to Pashas HaChedesh. Like it says in Halacha, Ein Mafsikim Para LaChedesh. A Peiresh is a Chiddush in Yonei, a Chiddush Lachem Chiddush HaGeula. A Chiddush means Mashiach. And when you do Tshuva, Mashiach comes. Nice. That's all I got to say.